The HP Outdoors Waterfowl podcast is powered by Cornerstone Gundog Academy. CGA is the world's most comprehensive online gun dog training resource. They've got over 160 instructional videos that includes everything you need to take your 7-week-old puppy to a finished gun dog. Visit cornerstonegundogacademy.com to sign up for the free preview module and begin your training journey today. Cornerstone Gundog Academy, the most advanced gun dog training resource on the web. You are listening to the HP Outdoors Waterfowl podcast. Since 1898, Old Town has been building the most advanced, quality watercraft products to give you the very best experience on the water. Whether you're hunting, fishing, or enjoying a relaxing paddle on the lake, there's a boat for every type of adventurer. If you haven't seen it, check out their newest offering, the new grab-and-go watercraft designed to function as your boat, blind, and retriever. The easy-to-conceal, 11-foot 9-inch, 56-pound Solo Sportsman is the ideal craft for those in search of a stable, lightweight craft that's easy to paddle and even easier to transport or stash. Designed with the hunter and angler in mind, the Solo Sportsman is equipped with thoughtful shell, tackle, and tool storage, a comfortable and adjustable seat and foot braces, an accessory track, and rod holders. Check it out at oldtowncanoe.com/sportsman. Out in the field, how you've prepared determines how you'll perform. With balanced fat and protein to support peak condition, Eukanuba Premium Performance Dog Food enhances strength, energy, and endurance. So when the pavement ends and the truck doors swing open, you and your dogs are ready for anything. Strong, focused, ready for anything? That's a Eukanuba dog. Lifetime Decoy's new Flex Float Mallard decoys set the new standard for quality and durability in waterfowl decoys. An EVA foam, open bottom construction combined with patent-pended dual flow swim keel system allows for more movement and less wind, the ability to sit flat on ice and dirt, and virtually indestructible design which can be shot or otherwise punctured and still float. Each decoy weighs only 11 ounces with the self-righting keel weights removed or 19 ounces with the weights installed. Check them out today at lifetimedecoys.com. All right, welcome to episode 171 of the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast. We're your on-demand audio source for all things waterfowl and waterfowl hunting. I'm your host, Josh Palm, and back in the saddle this week with my co-host, Dan Harushka. Dan, what's up, man?
Dude, how'd you feel about my intro last week?
I had to chuckle when, you're like, that was pretty neat. Like, your first time in 5 years or whatever doing it, and I'm proud of you. I feel like you branched out a little bit there.
I read the forum.
Yeah. Yeah, that was good stuff.
All good.
Yeah, it felt kind of weird.
It was really weird. It was weird for me.
Yeah, because even on episodes where I haven't been able to be there for the interview or what have you, like I always recorded the intro separately and put that in there. So now that we've gotten away from doing that to sort of streamline our edit process, it's on whoever's got the con on any given day. So it may not be the last time you have to do it.
Well, I'll run with it. Do what you got to do.
Fair enough. Well, if you are new to the show, welcome. And if you've been around for a while, welcome back. If you're trying to catch up on past episodes, you can head over to iTunes. That's probably the best place to get all of our past episodes, but you can find us on Stitcher or any great podcast content directory, catcher, whatever you want to call it out there. We're on all of those. You can also check us over at social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Put most of the episodes on YouTube as well. If you're a Facebook guy, you can check out our listeners group. Tons of great people in there talking waterfowl and waterfowl hunting and things that aren't waterfowl and waterfowl hunting as well, which is fine. So great community that we've got developed on social media. If you're new to the show, definitely check out those channels as well. All right, man. So this week, we got a couple different things that we're going to hit on. I think the main thing is we've kind of been kicking around this idea of like challenge hunts and challenging yourself when you're hunting. And I think we'll dive into this probably here in a few minutes, but we're going to discuss ways that you can make your hunts more challenging, but like not just more challenging for the sake of being more challenging, more of the sense of like forcing yourself to explore different ways of hunting or different ways of approaching a hunt that may force you to learn things that you didn't know, or explore techniques and tactics that you wouldn't typically explore, that may help you learn how to use those techniques more effectively. It's kind of one of those things where it's like, I sort of look at it like this, Dan. It's easy for me to take Spanish in school when I have to only speak it like 30 minutes out of the day and I can get by. Put me in Mexico where I have to use it exclusively, and you're going to learn to speak the language pretty quick, or you're going to have a really hard time, right? So
Yep.
immersing yourself into a situation where it forces you to do something that you wouldn't either typically do, or that it's out of your comfort zone, is only going to help you develop that skill and really determine if it's something that you should be using on a regular basis or not. So we'll get into that. But I think we would probably be remiss to not touch on the whole coronavirus thing that's going on right now. It's kind of, taking the country by storm, and it's really all you can find in media coverage and things like that these days. And, it's definitely impacted me here in Northern Virginia. My son's schools got canceled. Obviously sports across the board's being canceled. I talk about how we spend so much time in the spring on the baseball field. We were literally, as of next week, going to be practicing 6 days a week. And now I might have a lot of free time on my hands, because it seems like, a lot of the leagues and things are being canceled just in an abundance of caution, which sucks because a lot of kids are missing out, college kids and all high school kids and stuff like that. But might free up a bunch of my time. I think it's probably only a matter of time where you'll start seeing that all over the country,
Like what you were saying, my nephew who plays at Winthrop down in South Carolina, I just saw a post from my sister that said that their entire season is canceled. I think that's after 8 games. So it's just, we've never seen anything like this. Never seen NBA canceled or postponed, MLB pushed back. Like the March Madness is canceled now, right?
Yeah.
Not just no.
The NCAA has
spectators.
NCAA has canceled all of the remaining winter sports championships and everything for the spring. So, baseball doesn't finish. The College World Series isn't until like June. That's canceled. Like, that's not happening. You know what I mean? Like, that is a drastic step in this deal. So, it's
So let me ask you: do you feel like it's the right call instead of being postponed?
No, I don't know. I mean, I think logistically it just gets hard, right? If schools are closing down and, I don't know. I mean, that's just a really big, that's a really big move. It's hard to say that it's justified, but it's hard to say that it's not, because you just, there's a lot of things that you don't know yet, right? And I think everyone's hoping that we'll look back on this and say that was a massive overreach and they were dumb to do that. I hope that's the case, versus the alternative of being, wow, at the time we thought that was a massive overreach and a stupid thing to do, but with the benefit of hindsight now, like, that was a really smart thing. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So hopefully it's the first one. And I think everybody, you if you're gonna be on one side of history, you want to be on the, you don't want to be on the wrong side of something like that. So
yeah. Well, that's my old man was going out to Arizona. He was supposed to fly out Monday. So he used to hunt in California and Colorado and everywhere when he lived in California with a fellow that lived next to us, and he lives in Arizona now, and they were going to go out. Now that they're older, they both have metal detectors. They just recently found out that they're both into that. And Greg Hoffman is the guy's name, and he also pans for gold out there. So my dad's like, yeah, man, let's go. And so he booked a flight, which is huge for my dad. Like, he comes over to my house, I book it for him, all that. So at least American Airlines, I know, and a lot of other companies are waiving all the fee changes or the change fees, and they're letting you rebook flights. It has to be within the year, but at least they're not making you eat that cost, and with everything going on. And I actually talked to a lady today, and I was like, it was over a 2-hour wait, right? So
of course
they give you the option to call back, and this girl calls me and she's super sweet, and I was like, she, asked for my name and stuff. I was like, let me ask you a question. She's like, what's that? I said, how's your day going today? And she's like, you know what? It really hasn't been too bad. Like, we're just helping people and they're pretty understanding. And, we feel like we're doing the right thing by, not making people eat the money. And we're talking, I was like, are you guys flying planes like empty across the United States right now? Like 4 people on every plane? She's like, no, I flew yesterday and I couldn't even change my seat. I couldn't upgrade because the plane was full. So, I mean, people are still moving, which is that a good idea? Probably not. I don't know. We don't know. No one knows. But, yeah, so at least we got that figured out. He can reschedule and it won't be in the summertime, but maybe get out there in the fall and do some hunting with his old buddy.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things, man, where what are you supposed to do, right? I look at my situation, and yeah, my wife and I are in our mid 30s. We've got 2 kids that are young, and from everything that we've seen, would likely be fairly resistant slash, able to deal with this. So, for my immediate family, I don't worry about it as much. But, my in-laws live a half mile away from us. They're in their 60s. If my son goes to school and picks it up, or I go to work and I pick it up and I give it to them, like, it could be a much more significant thing.
Yep.
We talked about this off air, but we've got someone, one of the players on our baseball travel team's mom's going through chemotherapy right now for breast cancer, and like, the common cold is something that could literally threaten her. So, how responsible is it for us to drag her son around to practices and to tournaments and stuff where he could go home and give her something that could, have catastrophic effect. So,
Right.
everybody's situation is different, and everyone's got to deal with these things kind of in their own way. And, I think as long as your decisions that you make are in sound judgment and not of irrational fear, I think that you're probably making the right decision, whatever feels right for you and your family. So,
yeah. Well, that's like, my dad, he's like hard-headed, running through walls, hard-headed.
Mm-hmm.
And, he had a cancer issue. Now it's a year and a half out, 2 years out. And I'm like, dude, your immune system probably still isn't right. Like, so my brother and my sister and I talked to him, and he decided to cancel that trip, which he's been looking forward to. But I think it's the right call for him. And like you said, am I worried if I get it? No. All the percentages of the kids getting it, it just doesn't seem like they can carry it, but they're not having any of the symptoms, which is great news for children. But you're still getting some in the under 19, but not under 9 years old. And you never know if they have it unless you just randomly test, which we don't have the test for. So, like you said, you bring it home. And my dad was over today. I had my brother's kids over, and we were all playing. And they walk over to his house because he gives them candy. And in the back of my mind the entire time, like, if you guys have that and give it to him, like, that's a quick spread and could be very bad. And it's, I don't know. And just the whole hand washing and not touching your face and telling that to a 4-year-old and trying to get him to do it is,
it's impossible. I mean, my 8-year-old can't keep his hands out of his mouth. And I tell you right now, like, my face has never itched more in my entire life than this week when I'm like actively trying I'm not trying to touch my face. So like, I'm trying to like scratch with my shoulder and like, yeah, it's just crazy. It's a weird thing. And hopefully these measures that we're taking that seem drastic will, put it to bed quickly, and we'll be able to move on and get back to normal life here shortly. But yeah, I know there's a lot of good people working on vaccinations and stuff. And I tell you, we talked about this too, and this is a little bit of a transition, but relevant to the show here, I worry about the ability for some of these DU and Delta chapters and things to have successful banquets and raise funds. I mean, there's a DU event here locally in Northern Virginia on 28 March. And I'm like, man, I bet you that attendance will be down on that deal because, yeah, it's less than 1,000 people that, so it falls within the CDC guidelines and stuff. But I mean, I'm just not going to go to a place where I unnecessarily need to be around a group of people that could be, any one of them could be infected and pass it to me. Like, I'm just not going to do that.
That's the thing. Where we have our Delta banquet, there's a reverse raffle for our school, and that pays for all the sporting equipment and everything. It's a big fundraiser, and that's tomorrow. No, Saturday night. Tonight's Thursday night. That's Saturday night, and you have 300 people in a room, and beer's cheap, and you get people a little bit tuned up, and they start spending their money like a fundraiser usually does. And next thing you know, you haven't seen someone for 10 years, and you get talking sports, and they're drinking and spitting on you, and it's like
definitely not maintaining the social distance guidelines.
No, it's so it's so loud with everyone talking that they're right up in your face, and that's right on you. So I think they got our money for the tickets, which was not cheap, and I think that might be as far as I go, because honestly, I mean, I just try and stay away from it.
But I mean, it's not just it's that. It's like in the fundraising efforts, but business. This has wide ranging effects. I mean, businesses can't get shipments in from China. Like people are canceling. Things we were talking about. Photography work and event planning type work that we kind of do some things with on the side, and you got people canceling weddings because they're afraid, to get people together and stuff. And whether the fear is real or not, perception is reality. So if people perceive this to be something that's scary, then that's the reality of it, and it's affecting everybody. Yep. So, like I said, I hope that while these things seem drastic, hopefully it does calm people down and allow life to return to normal to what extent is reasonable at as soon as possible. And
well, look, I mean, honestly, businesses are going to be crushed, because if you have a cough and you go home, and people, I mean, this is going to hurt people really bad. And like you said, you and your wife have to alternate days of staying home.
Yeah.
And I read a thing that's it's like 30% of workers in the United States don't have paid time leave or sick time or anything to do that. So I mean, you can't send them to a daycare.
Nope.
You have to be off of work, and then that just shuts down the economy, man.
And that's the thing. Like, I get paid sick time, but I'm not allowed to use it for childcare. And this is, so I have to use my vacation days to stay home with my kid from school, because if he was actually sick or I was actually sick, I could use that sick paid time. But yeah, not to just, if school's out, and you just gotta do what you gotta do. So yeah, it's a sticky wicket. But anyway, enough Corona talk. Like, people hearing about that all the time, but we did kind of feel like it would just be sort of negligent to avoid, to completely not address it at all. So hoping for the best there, and hopefully this gets squared away quickly.
And if you have any questions about it, just go to Facebook, because everyone knows everything about it. So.
Indeed, absolutely. So anyway,
let me touch on a few things out of the new Delta Waterfowl magazine, if I could.
You can.
All right, so Delta is adding 500 hen houses in Manitoba. They have 3,850 already maintained there, and over 5,800 in place across Prairie, Canada. And how that's really cool, but we just had our Delta meeting this past Sunday, and we are starting to put out floating hen houses, which, as we all know, we could really use the population increase here in the Atlantic Flyway. But I think we're one of the first in our region to start doing this, and it's a really cool little design. I got a mosquito flying around me. Anyway, so it just buzzed right like in my beard, and I'm trying not to touch my face. Anyway, just some PVC, and it's kind of like in a rectangle. You put some like a piece of wood on it, put the roll on top of it, put a weight down, and keep it in place. So you try and put it in an area where you can drive by and see if it's being used, during the season, and I think that's just kind of cool. So I'm actually opening up my garage. Hopefully we get everything put together here soon and out, because there are tons of ducks around. I've seen, the wood ducks are back. We have tons of redheads and canvasbacks and bluebills on the local lakes, just all over the place. It's just awesome to watch. Got teal buzzing around, and I told you, so many buffleheads just being little butterballs everywhere. So I do love this time of year, and I wish that this amount of waterfowl was around in the fall. So I don't know. It always gives me hope knowing that there's a ton of birds going back to the breeding grounds.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's always, I've noticed it too. A lot of birds, around right now as they make that reverse migration, which is, it's always fun to see. And this year it seemed like it was pretty short, right? I mean, I feel like they were here and then gone for just a few weeks, and they were back coming back, just a weird year for that. So
it was so warm.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we really had one, significant weather event, if I could even call it that. It was probably like maybe 6 inches of really wet snow that melted really quickly. That's literally all we got here this year. We had some couple cold weather days, but nothing like we've had in the past. So unfortunately, wasn't a lot to speak of for weather.
Yeah.
So,
one other note: there's so much good information in this magazine, and I'm hoping to have Mr. John Devney back on to talk about some of the isotopes and stuff that they're using, and figuring out where these ducks are breeding at to be more successful. So hopefully we can get him on here and talk about that. But one of the cool things, the Federal Migratory Bird Hunting Conservation Stamp, the duck stamp, aka, generated more than 1.1 billion over its lifespan, and secured more than 6 million acres of waterfowl habitat. So super cool. And to celebrate the conservation achievements of hunters, they're proposing changes to the federal duck stamp contest beginning in 2020. And under the proposed new rules, all entries in the juried art competition would be required to include one or more visual elements that reflect the theme celebrating our waterfowl hunting heritage. And they actually did a test run of it, as everyone that bought a duck stamp knows. Last year's was a test run, so that was the 2018 contest, and it had the wood duck decoy in the background. So, pretty cool to see that recognition going to hunters. Yeah. And the conservation efforts that have been with it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the things that, like, you hear people talk about, but when I just feel like sometimes it doesn't really, I don't know. It just doesn't really, when you think about that, the numbers that you were just saying and what that's done, that stupid stamp, right? I mean, it's crazy, right? It's a stamp, but what that has meant to waterfowl hunters and conservation over the years is pretty incredible. Like it's something to really take note of. Yeah, just pretty neat.
I'm excited to see the stamps that come out, the competition and what wins. 'Cause, I mean, last year's stamp was incredible, right? With the wood duck decoy and everything going along with that. So
yeah,
I don't know what the rules are, if you can have, guns or straps of ducks or whatever, but I'm excited to see it anyways.
Yeah, agreed.
It does say in 2020, eligible species are brant, gadwall, cinnamon teal, lesser scalp, and red-breasted merganser. So maybe it'll be hunters water swatting some mergansers. I don't know.
That'd be something if it was a picture of a straight up water swat.
Dude, I would buy so many of those.
Yeah, you'd buy all of them. Every letter you send out for the next foreseeable future would have a federal duck stamp on it. Just worth the cost of doing business.
Yep.
All right, man, let's change gears a little bit and talk about this idea of challenging yourself on hunts and just challenging hunts in general. And when we talk about this, I kind of think back to the I forget what you call it, the minimalist challenge or whatever,
right,
that you did for a while. So maybe for people that are new or don't recall what that was, sort of fill us in on what you were trying to accomplish there. And I do find it interesting that as you did that, there were several others in the Facebook group that were kind of doing the same thing. So it sort of became a thing that everyone, a lot of guys were trying out. And tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I did. I think I was allowed to have one piece of camo, which I think I wore a camo shirt. I wore brown pants, no blind. I had one. Well, this to set it. It was in the zone where you could only shoot one goose in Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. So this zone you can shoot one. So I had one shell. I had my dog laying down next to me, and I started it because I had like maybe 30 minutes, 40 minutes before I had to get up and take the kids to daycare. Was not daycare, maybe their babysitter at the time, whatever it was. I had like 40 minutes. So the field across from my house, always in the early season, you'll get birds dropping in, and they just make me angry to see in the morning. So I decided, all right, one piece of camo, gun, one shell, one decoy, and we called it the minimalist challenge. So the few times I did it, I was not successful, and it was just from time restraints. If I would have sat there a little longer, I would have had it. But that was fun. It was fun to follow along and keep trying it. But it seemed like every time I got up and got back to the house, they started landing. So just a time restraint. But anyway, yeah, getting into this, like, challenging your hunts, and like you said in the intro, is you don't know what you don't know. And if you are being successful, can you be more successful? And if you aren't being successful, can you be successful if you make small changes or changes that you think are not smart? Right? Kind of?
Yes. Yeah, essentially.
So, I guess we can start it out with let's start out with your shotgun. And I was thinking this because I was watching some waterfowl hunting shows, and I don't know where it was at, but you have a ton of birds coming in, right? And it always seems like the first ones that are coming in might still be at 30 yards when the person calls the shot. And say that you have a 12 gauge and you're confident at 30 or 40 yards, but maybe you drop down to a 20 gauge and you want shots at 15 or 20 yards. Are you going to let those first birds land and let the rest of them puddle in and maybe get closer, or do one more swing and come in closer and make it a more successful hunt because you're more confident and you're shooting at a closer distance?
Yeah, I think altering your shotgun can have a lot of different things, right? It makes you reconsider how you're going to let birds work. If they have to be closer, is that going to impact the way you set your decoys? Is that going to impact your way you're trying to get the birds to work the spread? So that there's those tactical decisions that would force you to consider, but also, if you're going to need to get birds closer, are you going to look more close at your hide, spend more time concealing yourself, brushing in? I don't think anyone will dispute that it can be fun to downsize your firearm of choice. I mean, you see people going to 20 gauge or using smaller sometimes or whatever. So yeah, I mean, it can be a good way to force yourself to look critically at certain things, because if you can shoot birds at 40 yards, there's a lot more you can get away with than if you got to shoot them at 25 or 20 or whatever it is.
And here's another thought for people listening. if you have a semi-auto 12 gauge and you're averaging 1 kill per 3 shots. If you went to an over and under or a side by side and you know that you only have 2 shots, are you going to focus more on those shots than you do with the semi-automatic?
No doubt. I mean, I think that can be said for a regular 12, just a pump 12 gauge. I mean,
Yeah.
I think the fact that you actually have to physically cycle the round gives you pause to like reestablish yourself and make another clean shot. I mean, I've definitely been guilty of it because I don't have to wait and I can just mash the trigger 3 times quickly. Like I'll rush a shot or I won't, reestablish a good sight picture before or get a good lead. Right. I mean, there's a lot of things that you have time to screw up when you don't have to take time to reload the gun or think, because most of the time, if you're hunting with typically when we hunt with a fairly good number of dudes, right? Like there's very few times where it's just like me and one other person. I'm usually in a group of like 4, 5, 6 type of dudes, right? And if a flock works us around here, at least again, rarely is my third shot a bird that's still like in super close range, right? So
Right.
like my first shot's usually money in the sense of like it's a good killable shot. Like if I miss it, it's on me. The next one's kind of questionable, and if you drop it, right, if it's not a follow up on that third shot, that bird is definitely approaching the far ranges of your ability, and executing a good shot with quality lead and all that kind of stuff is hard to do, and it's easy to rush that as the birds are kind of like hightailing out of there, and you're just trying to get that third one off. So it's definitely something that it's kind of like a balance, right? Because maybe with the pump gun, I don't get that third shot off. But with the semi-auto, maybe it's just a trash shot anyway. So what's the difference? So it's definitely something to think about.
I think you definitely fine tune your shooting skills by, and I don't want to say downgrading, right? Downgrade to a over and under. I don't want to say that, but challenging yourself to go to out of your confidence range. You're confident with that semi-auto, tone it back to over and under, go to a single shot, and lock in, and then your next hunt, go back to your 12 gauge and see if you can take that, the steadiness and the focus, and get back on it.
Well, it's the same concept that we've talked about in the past about these public land areas that only allow you to take so many shells into the field with you.
Right.
So it's like if you had to go to the blind and you only had 10 shells for the whole day, you're going to make those 10 count. You're not just going to go to the plug on a single. You know what I mean? Like you're going to do what you can to maximize your production per shot. So it's the same thing. And if you get to an over under or side by side where you have less bullets to shoot on any given volley, you're going to take a little extra care. And even if that third shot on the semi-auto is typically one that's the most difficult shot, it's still mentally easier to tell yourself that you got 3 versus you only got 2. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, I think it can definitely create a unique challenge for any given hunt.
I like that. I like that one a lot. Next challenge, I would say, is the amount of decoys that you use. And going back to the minimalist challenge, the one goose decoy that I was using, but really here in the Atlantic Flyway, our mallard limit is 2, and when you go around and look at the lakes during season, you're not seeing giant pockets of mallards. And when we get our group together and everyone's like, "Oh, I'll bring decoys, I'll bring mine too," and you end up with 3 or 4 dozen. You don't see that, right? You don't see that when you're scouting, and it's a very weird feeling the first time to put out 4 or 5 decoys. You put them on a jerk rig and start getting the motion, and that seems to be working better than large spreads that I used to put out regarding puddle ducks, not divers.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned this because I've talked about it on the show before. This is way back. So if you're haven't been here for a long time, you've probably not heard me talk about this, but I used to hunt. I haven't hunted in a couple of years now, but a public area where the blinds were available by a lottery. And on a Saturday, you'd see every blind up through the river have, 2 or 3 dozen mallards, or later in the season, you might see some bluebill decoys sitting out in front of these box blinds. And I swear the birds that, had been there for a little while obviously knew what was going on, and they would fly just out of range based on where the decoys were set. But they would fly much closer to the box blinds that didn't have hunters in it that given day. And I swear it was because they knew, well, there's no decoys here, so this one's safe. And I always told myself, one of these days I'm going to come out here and not bring decoys. And I'm just going to sit in this box blind and shoot birds as they come by, pass shoot them, because they're going to be more confident to come close because they're associating these groups of decoys right in front of the box blinds with danger. And because, every time they fly by one, they get shot at. Mm-hmm. And I swear that would work, but I could not mentally bring myself to do it. Like, I just could not get the confidence to do it, because there were people that were killing birds, but I saw a ton that would just stay on the outer edge and not do it.
So this is funny that you bring that up. I was talking to my father-in-law yesterday about this, and he used to hunt Pima tuning, and the blinds out there, they would draw blinds, and he said, and I think I've mentioned this about Kevin Oates too, because he lives right across the street from where the blinds are at, and he watches them make like essentially a snake pattern, just S after S, going in and out of where all the blinds are, coming towards his house and over to some different properties. But my father-in-law was saying, he goes, I'm sitting there and we have all the decoys out, and they're just, they would go swing right around us. And eventually he said, hey, let's pull the decoys. So they got all the decoys, put them in the blind with them, and they shot their limits, because they just, the same thing, they get so accustomed to seeing that, and not, maybe that, take that approach that it doesn't have to be an actual blind that is set up and they're so used to it. But if they see the same 2 to 3 dozen and a spinner out, and they got shot the day before or whatever, it might be advantageous to change it up.
Yeah, and I know that this is definitely like a region specific thing, because there's definitely places where you just have to have decoys to hunt, right? I mean, some of these places that we've seen and where we've been, the volume of birds is just way different, right? Completely different beast. But where we're hunting, we don't have that kind of bird, number to deal with. So it's definitely something that you should try. And another thing that's going to make it hard is, okay, if you don't have any duck decoys in front of you, like, are you going to blow your duck call, like, to try to get birds to give you a look? I'd say no, because I'd say the same kind of thing in that situation, that they start associating that call with danger as well. So yeah, it's a realistic thing for at least the Atlantic Flyway, I believe, where you can consistently probably kill some birds if they're in the area and they're really, really heavily pressured, like the two kind of scenarios we've talked about.
Yep. And that's, one of the best days, not volume, but just I shot that banded mallard, black duck, and a hen. It was just a beautiful, perfect morning. And I had five floaters and a spinner out.
Yeah.
And they just ate it up. Yeah. So yeah, where usually I would throw out a couple dozen and sit there and watch them outside my spread.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the right number of decoys is the right, whatever it takes to get the job done that day. So whether it's 5 or 2 dozen or 0 or whatever.
I just still think that's a mentality that you have to have a lot of decoys out, right? Which sometimes for visuals, you do need that, but I don't know. Yeah. And most of that's on a lake that I hunt.
It's definitely one that's hard to overcome, the idea of not doing.
So there, challenge yourself.
Yeah,
challenge.
Well, short of like, a quick after work hunt or something where you're out for like 30 minutes the last bit of the day, right? We're talking like, you're up, you're going, you're out there before sunrise, like you're in position, you're set up, and to not throw out a decoy, that's it'd be hard to do, no doubt.
It's weird.
Yeah, definitely weird.
Oh man. And yeah, I did have the no calling versus different cadence written down here as a note, and I think we've hammered that quite often to actually try and start out the day with no calling, because everyone wants to start out the first, you see a duck and you want to start hammering right away, and I think to try and be quiet, or hit the Drake whistle a little bit maybe, and be different in that scenario.
Yeah, I'm going to throw something at you here with this one that I think is a good challenge for folks. I think a lot of people don't truly understand how motion affects ducks and how useful it can be and when it should be used and all that kind of stuff. I think what a lot of guys do, they go out and they're like, all right, I got my jerk string. I know I need motion. I got my calls. I know I need calls. I got my decoys. I know I need them. And they go out there and then they get the first group of ducks out in front of them and they're just doing everything. Calling, pull the jerk string, hit the flag, whatever, right? Like throwing everything at them that you can. And I think if you take hunts and just pick one of those things to use. So say this hunt is just going to be motion. And let's say we're field hunting honkers as an example. And all we're going to do is use flags. And we're going to maybe try to put a flapper out in the spread or something and see how birds respond and use it at different times on their approach and see what works and see what doesn't, so that you can now know, okay, these birds work effectively at roughly this range when I'm using the flag or whatever. They've responded, they didn't respond to this, or this flared them. They were too close or whatever, right? So you get that feel because there's no other elements that are going on that could cause that reaction, right? So now you're learning, all right, I know that when I hit them on the corners at this distance, roughly, they turn or they respond well. Now you can use that knowledge to incorporate it into your calling when you're hunting under a normal condition, right? Where you're kind of using all the tools in the toolbox. Same with calling, being able to just take the other factors out of the mix and just call to them using different cadences or different, sequences or aggressiveness, and not, be non-aggressive, whatever, lay down stuff, whatever it is, right? To just see how they respond and really truly kind of study what's happening in that situation so that you can add that specific piece of detail to your approach. And that way you can incorporate the best of those things together.
Yep. Yeah. It's fun to break it down like this. I really like talking about this stuff, and it almost takes me back to, just 2 episodes ago, and how Matt McCormick was talking about how he really takes notes on different situations and what's going on, and try and break it down. So I don't know. It's fun.
Well, it's fun I can tell you the most successful hunters that I'm around, the ones that consistently kill birds, they share 2 things in common. One, they scout a ton, and they're typically in an area where birds want to be or very close to it. But 2, they understand the behavior of the birds and understand how to interact with them to get them to do what you want them to do, and whether that's interacting with a group of 40 or a group of 300, that's the key. I mean, you got to know what kind of groups you're dealing with and what your approach is to get them to do what you want to do. If you're not prepared to deal with birds on that magnitude, you can't really have an expectation of success if you just kind of go out there and wing it. Some of that you'll have to do to learn, but you talked about, Matt and Brady talked about how much detail and how much they pay attention to the scout and what they can learn from that alone that formulates that plan for the following day. All of that is just really critical stuff to think about. And that's another way maybe you challenge yourself. When I first started scouting, I was basically like, okay, they're landing in that field and they're landing in that spot in the field. And that was pretty much how I packed it in. Mm-hmm. Now it's obviously a little more, I'm more focused on time, where are they coming from? how big are the groups when they're on the ground? How tight are they? Do they look alarmed? How much noise are they making on their approach? Are they making noise when they're on the ground? All of that kind of stuff is now things that I consider. But at first I didn't, and those are just things that you learn because it's like you're out there setting your decoy spread and you're, okay, I want to match what they were doing out here, but like, I don't really know how close they were standing because I didn't really pay attention or, whatever. So, those are just things you kind of pick up along the way.
Yes, sir. I think the last thing I have here are trying different styles. And for one, if you're a shore hunter and you have access to a kayak and maybe you can get out a little bit, maybe into some brush or up against an island that maybe before you thought was too far, or I don't want to say too far, but maybe just, not the easiest thing to do. I think, actually setting up a good blind over the kayak or the canoe or whatever you have going on. And I'm speaking to myself a lot in this one because I need to really take the time and pimp out that Old Town solo kayak canoe. So I want to get that set up and there's just so many little places that I could fit that thing in and be right where I need to be instead of pass shooting. I think I could be right on the X. So a little more effort on my end, I think, would be a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, rarely is effort not rewarded, right?
Right.
That's kind of the name of the game. So I would agree with you. I mean, if you think that there's a way, and that to me is huge, especially in areas where there's, I don't want to say abundant, but there's public land options. So those are areas that are open to everyone. And if you live in a state where there's like where I live, it's very limited on public hunting. So it's like, you're not really going to sneak away to when there's like 2 WMAs in the area and like a couple other public access spots, like you're not going to sneak by anybody, right? I mean, those places are fully flushed out. But, in an area like Pennsylvania where there's abundant game lands, seasonal wetlands that, beaver dams that take place, whatever, there's a lot of things that can pop up. Going that extra step to identify those little pockets is absolutely going to be something that, could be the difference. And if you go to the same spots that you continually hunt all the time, you're not going to be there. If you're there alone, you're not going to be there alone for long because it's only going to take 1 or 2 mornings where you're sitting there shooting at birds and the guys a couple hundred yards up the way aren't shooting at anything. And the next time they come to hunt, they're going to be looking to sit where you're at,
yep.
And beating you to that spot. So you got to be a step ahead and sort of anticipate that kind of thing. And the birds, like we talked about, you get into these public areas where they're pressured, they're going to learn pretty quickly. So unless you're getting constant flow of new birds moving into the area that are not hip to the game, you're going to start having problems finishing birds in those areas. So you need to identify those isolated pockets that you're talking about where you can get there. It's a little more effort, but you can still get there and be concealed, and it's still an environment and habitat that's advantageous to ducks to want to be in. So that's sort of like the magic sauce right there, right?
Yep.
So finding those areas is critical. And if you're not challenging yourself to look for those, you're obviously never going to find them.
I agree. I like it. So challenge yourself to think outside the box and maybe change up your style a little bit, and you might be pleasantly surprised on how it works out for you.
Yeah, I think the takeaway here is, it's not necessarily bad to change up your technique. Oftentimes we do it out of necessity because we have to, right? Because what we've been doing, it's not working, or it's not working as well as we want it to. What we're saying here is do it not because you need to, but because you want to, just to try something different and to explore those things. So when you get to those areas where you have to make changes and you have to make decisions, you might be a little more prepared to have success where you can expedite that learning curve and sort of get some of those things under your belt. Because, as we've talked about, we only get a few days during the season where the push is good. And if you're spending those days trying to figure it out, you're wasting opportunity, right? So, use those days when the hunting is tougher, maybe early season or before the good pushes are in, trying to figure the puzzle out, right? I mean, it's always changing and it's always something that's going to be, a variable here or there that you'll have to consider. But I think in general, there's some key factors that you can consider and look at and sort of take into the equation, just sort of at least solve part of the puzzle. Get you a little, one more step closer, a little bit ahead of the game.
I mean, could you imagine if you looked more forward to the non-push days than the push days because you had that puzzle figured out?
I mean, I can't even imagine. I cannot imagine that being a thing, but it'd be cool if it was, for sure.
There you go. Maybe if someone has that secret sauce, shoot us a message. Yeah. Or if you do this kind of stuff, shoot us a message.
Yeah, no doubt. I would agree. All right, you got anything else you want to hit on this week before we roll out of here?
I think that's pretty good, man.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
I like it.
Awesome. Well, it's good to be back with you here this week. And
oh yeah, one more thing.
Go ahead, send it.
If you need toilet paper, hit me up. I'll cut you a deal.
Just couldn't help yourself, huh?
Couldn't help it.
You're laughing so hard at your own.
I've fully embraced the dad jokes and how bad they are. So I'm at that point.
Neat. All right. Well, on that note, we're out of here. So till next week. That's going to do it for this episode of the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast. If you're new to the show, head over to iTunes, check out some of our past episodes, and while you're there, leave us a 5-star rating and review. It's the best way for like-minded hunters just like you to find our show. Check us out on social media. Check us out over at hpoutdoors.com and anywhere you can find quality podcast content. That's going to do it for this week. Till next time, for Dan, I'm Josh. Take care.